A few years ago, a video surfaced comparing Heath Ledger's Oscar-winning performance as the Joker to an old interview with musician Tom Waits. The video suggested that Waits' unique speech pattern and dialect may have served as an inspiration for Ledger's portrayal of the character. And when watching the two side by side, the similarities are apparent, and it made me wonder if this was just a coincidence or an insight into the process of one of the most talked about performances of recent times. As a great admirer of Heath Ledger's work, I was intrigued. This prompted me to embark on a deeper exploration of the methods and processes Ledger used to bring this iconic character to life. And whilst researching, I discovered a fascinating mix of imaginative work, meticulous preparation, and outside-the-box influences. It became clear to me that Heath Ledger's Joker wasn't just some stroke of genius or an esoteric mystery as it's often made out. It was the culmination of incredibly hard work, collaboration, and artistry. And so in this video, we're doing a deep dive into the pop cultural figures, artistic inspirations, and acting techniques that shape this legendary character and performance. Heath Ledger's Joker didn't just happen. It was a masterful blend of research and innovation, and one that left a lasting impact on film, pop culture, and an entire new generation of young actors. One of the reasons I'm keen to make this video is that I feel that with a lot of these performances there's a kind of mysterious perception to them. And whilst I don't necessarily have a problem with that, I think if this becomes the main narrative, it can become too easy to overlook the hard work and collaborative efforts that quite often go into giving a performance like this. And by breaking down and reverse engineering the process, I can hopefully make an interesting and useful video for actors and creators that gives practical and actionable methods that can be implemented in your own work. Now, for obvious reasons, there's also a great deal of sadness surrounding the story of Heath Ledger. But in this video, I want to celebrate and admire the creative work done by an artist. I'm not going to be feeding into the narrative that playing the Joker killed him or weighing in on his personal affairs. I simply want to examine the craft of a highly skilled, multidisciplinary artist. So let's go ahead and dive into some of the confirmed and speculated sources of inspiration for Heath Ledger's Joker. Number 1. A Clockwork Orange. Looking at the diary Heath Ledger kept whilst preparing for the role, a key source of inspiration seems to have come from Alex DeLarge, the central character in Stanley Kubrick's A Clockwork Orange. Watching Alex, we begin to see striking similarities. A deeply disturbed individual who thrives in chaos and violence purely for enjoyment. Alex leads a gang, reveling in acts of cruelty and destruction, and when viewed alongside the Joker, the parallel becomes even more evident, offering insight into how Heath Ledger likely drew from Alex's evil personality to create the Jokers. Both characters take pleasure in violence as a means of exerting power and control, and in their actions we see a philosophical rejection of societal norms. It's also worth noting that Heath Ledger took influence not only from the film, but also studied the character as portrayed in the original novel. While A Clockwork Orange provided a philosophical backbone for Ledger's Joker, his preparation went beyond human characteristics. This brings us to another intriguing influence, the Hyena. While it's unknown to what degree the Hyena was used when creating the Joker, if we look at this page from the Joker diary, we can see a photo of the Hyena right opposite one of Alex DeLarge. Now when we look at the animal in motion and consider its energy and mannerisms, I personally feel that some animal studies and maybe even some animal transformation work likely took place here. For those who are hearing the term animal transformation work and thinking, what on earth is this guy on about? By studying and embodying traits of an animal, you can reflect parts of yourself and help you move away from your natural rhythms and into one that is more aligned with the character. Just to give you a few quick examples of other great performances that called on animal work, Jake Gyllenhaal's Lou Bloom in Nightcrawler was originally based on a coyote, as instructed by director Dan Gilroy, who wanted the character to be like a nocturnal predator driven by an insatiable hunger. Another famous example is Marlon Brando, who reportedly studied a gorilla as part of his prep for A Streetcar Named Desire, helping him create that primal aggression. Another key influence was the punk movement, notably Sid Vicious, Johnny Rotten and Iggy Pop. And when considering the similarities between the energy and spirits of the Joker next to the Sex Pistols, for example, you can see why. The Joker is a character defined by chaos, unpredictability and rebellion. By using the Sex Pistols as an influence, Ledger was able to craft a Joker who, much like the punk movement at the time, rejected authority, embraced anarchy, and lived to create disorder. So with punk music and its rebellious figures as a muse, he would have been able to tap into that raw anarchy that is so essential for his high-energy performance as the Joker. Music was evidently a big part of Heath Ledger's life, and I can imagine that using musical figures really would have been an effective way to really understand the character that he was setting out to play. Christian Bale recently said this in an interview. He modelled the part on Sid Vicious, which made this punk-like character. his Joker is unlike any other Joker seen before. I think it's a classic portrayal of a great villain. And much like music, artwork can also be a great source of emotional stimulation when meditating on or creating a character, and that very much seems to be the case with the Joker. Over a string of interviews at the time, Christopher Nolan revealed some of the influences discussed during prep, one of the most notable being the artwork of Francis Bacon. Nolan said in an interview, "I showed the image to Heath Ledger whilst he was preparing to play the Joker in The Dark Knight, and he instantly sparked to his tortured and torturing humanity. It informed the makeup for his character in the most tactile of ways." With Nolan being such a fan of the artist, the influence over the vision of the character is definitely present. And whilst Heath Ledger said he was never much of a comic fan growing up as he was in a household of sisters, comics were definitely a source of inspiration during the preparation. Pages from the Batman comics are featured in the Joker diary, and as the Nolan brothers used a killing joke as a key influence, it's very likely Heath Ledger would have studied it as part of his preparation too. I also want to mention an interesting influence for the movements and mannerisms that came from Ventriloquist Dummies and the way that they spoke. Heath Ledger was allegedly scared of ventriloquist dummies, and so by mimicking them, he was going headfirst into his personal fears and making choices that fired up his imagination in ways that would have been personal and accessible to him. And when we watch the final performance, I do feel like there's a puppet-like quality to his speech and his movement. At times it's almost like he's held up on strings. And whilst we're speaking of movements and mannerisms, I have to mention Tom Waits. As I mentioned at the start of this video, when we compare the Joker to Tom Waits, especially in this interview from 1979, the similarities are very apparent.
I was on the plane from Paris for about 22 hours. It was a fascinating flight.
These cops and lawyers wouldn't dare cross any of you.
Now, my personal feeling is that Tom Waits likely was used as a key reference when finding the voice for the character, without any quotes about it from Heath Ledger himself. It's quite likely we'll never get full confirmation of this. But what we do know is that Heath Ledger used musicians and pop cultural figures to inform other key aspects of the character. He was a big fan of music, loving artists like Nick Drake, Radiohead, Jeff Buckley, and very likely Tom Waits. Now, when doing accent work, it's often a really good practice to work with a coach using a very specific reference to the target dialect you're going for. This can prevent the final accent and voice of the character from being too general or hard to believe. Oftentimes, the more specific you go, the more it will be believed by an audience. Now, in my personal experience, while sometimes you are able to find the right voice for a character on your own, if you really put the work in and take the time, and ideally work with a dialect coach to find strong specific references you can use, the end results are often more gratifying. So I think it's very, very plausible that Tom Waits' voice and dialect could well have been the reference used to inform how the Joker speaks and sounds. But I think it's worth mentioning that I don't think this takes away from the performance or makes it less original in any way. I think this is a really great example of taking from real life and meshing it with imagination and vibrant real life influences to shape a living character on screen. As I'm aware there's lots of great videos out there about the preparation for this role, I'm really going to focus on some specific aspects here that I feel are less common or have been covered less in other videos. While I do think it's really interesting to look at the choice to essentially self-isolate for 6 weeks in a hotel room whilst preparing and developing the character, it's something that's been covered extensively. And I guess the same goes for the Joker diary, but I'm choosing to mention it in this video because I think it's a really great example of how you can use a book to contain ideas and references for a character. What I specifically like about the Joker diary is the fact that it includes things that were clearly intended to really appeal to the imagination and fire it up. In the diary, we see key bits of text from the script, key themes, along with images and personal prompts that when combined really give life and context to the script and allowed Heath to bring himself to the character. And by anchoring it in the text, not only is one able to bring themselves into the role, but they're also able to stay on task and be true to what's already given on the page. Another thing I really wanted to mention is that Heath Ledger liked to work from the breath and from the voice when he was acting. While there is no right or wrong way to act, and there's no right or wrong approach, I really think it's interesting to explore this as it's not that common. Here's an excerpt of Heath talking about how he used breath and voice to shape performances.
Walk around like a madman in finding posture, finding stance. Finding his voice is very important because when you find the voice, you find the breath within the voice.
Now, another thing that I really wanted to get across in this video that I feel perhaps other videos on the topic sometimes skim over or don't really draw enough attention to is how collaborative the process of building this character and bringing it to life really was. I think his ability to collaborate and to align himself with like-minded collaborators is worth praising itself and is an important factor in the success of this performance and something that's very useful for young actors to know. So I just wanted to dedicate some time to mentioning the collaborative spirit of Heath Ledger on this production and bring some attention to some of the key figures that helped shape this character. His collaboration and talks with Christopher Nolan about the Joker are well known, and the fact that the two went into this project with their vision of the character almost completely in sync must have led the way for a very strong collaborative relationship when talking before and during production. There's also growing accounts from his peers on set, from lead cast to day players, all speaking to Heath's fun energy on set and inclusion of them. He would ask the opinion of his peers, checking on how his performance was coming across. And unlike tales of some pretentious method actors, all accounts suggest that Heath went the extra mile to support his fellow actor, even going through hours of hair and makeup just to be there for other actors even when they weren't shooting coverage of him. For the look and the costume of the character, Heath worked closely with costume designer Lindy Hemming as the two worked together to find clothing that aligned with the vision of the character, calling on various pop culture figures and being precise in the clothing they picked for the character. And I think one of the most important collaborators to mention here is Gerry Grennell. Gerry was Heath's dialect and acting coach who worked with Heath on almost all of his films, The Dark Knight being no exception. Not only did Gerry help Heath form ideas and find the voice for the character, he was alongside him on set, helping him and guiding him through crucial scenes. One of my favourite accounts is from the infamous party crashing scene. In this interview, I think we get a real insight into the collaborative relationship they had.
When we were shooting the scene in where he comes into the party, there was a crowd that side of the camera and this side of the camera. It was a very large crowd, so he didn't expect it to be so big. He said, "This feels like walking onto a stage. I wasn't prepared for so many people. How do I play this?" I said, well, you're a psychopath. So they're your toys. You play with your toys.
And for actors watching this, I highly recommend looking into Gerry Grennell and his incredible philosophy on acting. I'll leave some links that I think are interesting down below to some interviews and his work with Bow Street Academy. So we've taken some time to really explore and dive into some of the key aspects to this performance, and I just wanted to end this video by sharing some thoughts on what this all means and how it can be applied to your own creative work. For me, studying the process really illuminated the fact that Heath Ledger did not just pull the Joker out of thin air. When we demystify the process, we start to really see and admire the hard work, focus and dedication that goes into finding how to bring life to the text and play a part so well. What really inspires me is the childlike sense of play that is apparent in his work. There's an ability to just take things that are personal and provocative to the imagination and just really allow them to fire up the creative process. The process I see being used here is much like that of making a wonderful collage from all these different sources. From music to artwork to books and films, Heath took all these things that had threads of the character running through them and he pulled them all in to create something vivid and new. It reminds me of a quote from Stanislavski's book, An Actor Prepares. The actor must approach the character as if it were a suit of clothes which he must tailor to himself. He must first make the fabric his own, then form it to suit his physical and spiritual shape. Then he must put it on, live in it and breathe in it, until it becomes a second skin, so that no one will ever see it as a disguise, but rather a natural extension of his own being. Stanislavski's approach to character creation aligns so well with the way Heath Ledger brought the Joker to life, and this idea of drawing from life brings us to another key insight that I want to end this video with. But I just wanted to try and encourage people as I close this video. So I encourage you to explore this in your own work, be it acting, directing, painting, whatever it may be. Do not lose that sense of play that you had as a child. Don't be afraid to look at life and different mediums for inspiration. Because if it fires up your imagination, then I don't think it should matter what it is. And what works for one person won't work for everyone. We all have our own path and our own journey, and it's essential to remember that when you are creating. Find your own process, and when you can, draw from real life. There's this quote that I love from Stella Adler about acting and the creative process that I think relates here, and I'd like to take the opportunity to share it as I close this video. An actor must create from the material of life. You cannot invent what is not there. You must use what exists in the world and find it within yourself. Everything the actor needs is in life. The material is all around you. The world is filled with it. Your job is to see it, to find it, and to use it to shape your character. You must take what life gives you and build on it to bring your character to life on stage. Thank you very much for watching this video. If there are any other performances, actors, characters, things like that you would like to learn more about, let me know, and I'd love to do another video diving deep into the technique, the influences, and hopefully try and find ways that we can draw inspiration out of great work that has been done before us. Thank you.